Grammy-winning R&B singer D'Angelo dying at just 51 years old after a battle with pancreatic cancer. In a heartfelt message, Jamie Foxx, calling his voice silky and flawless, saying today, "Real tears run down my face."
When we're on the stage, that's exactly where we're going. We're going straight to church in a lot of the songs. And it doesn't matter where we go. We could be in Japan, we could be from Japan to Poland, and people will connect and feel that spirit. It totally informs everything that I do. When I go out on the stage, I bring that with me.
When D'Angelo whispered those final words about industry snakes before his death on October 14, 2025, he wasn't talking about double-crossing colleagues or greedy managers. Sources close to his deathbed reveal he was exposing something far more sinister, a systematic network that had been manipulating, exploiting, and ultimately destroying black artists for decades. What D'Angelo discovered in his final months about Virgin Records, the Angie Stone deception, and the real reason behind his 14-year disappearance would change everything we thought we knew about the music industry's darkest secrets. In those final months battling pancreatic cancer in his Manhattan apartment, D'Angelo wasn't just fighting for his life, he was fighting to expose truths that had haunted him for over 2 decades. His cryptic warning about industry snakes suddenly made devastating sense when you understood what he'd really experienced at the hands of Virgin Records.
From the music world, R&B legend D'Angelo has passed. His family saying that he died after a battle with pancreatic cancer and that the shining star of our family has dimmed his light for us in this life.
The timeline starts in 1994, when a young Michael Archer signed with Virgin Records, believing he was joining a family that would nurture his artistry. Instead, he walked into what insiders now describe as a systematic exploitation machine designed to break artists who refuse to play the game. The pattern was established early: create impossible expectations, provide unlimited resources, then pull everything away when the artist shows independence. Ray Cooper, Virgin's co-president, admitted they'd spent well over $1 million on studio sessions that D'Angelo allegedly abandoned. But sources close to the situation reveal a darker truth. Those sessions were deliberately sabotaged by the label itself. Engineers would book expensive studio time, then receive mysterious last-minute cancellations attributed to D'Angelo, creating massive debt while painting him as unreliable. This wasn't unique to D'Angelo. The exact same pattern had destroyed other Virgin artists who refused to compromise their vision. The label would spend astronomical amounts on projects, then blame the artist for cost overruns and erratic behavior, creating financial dependency and public perception problems simultaneously.
It's very obvious when you hear words and lyrics, whether they enlighten or discourage.
The Prince connection becomes crucial here. Before his own death, Prince had explicitly warned younger artists about this trap. His own battle with Warner Brothers, where he literally called himself a servant and changed his name to a symbol, was a public declaration against the system D'Angelo was quietly experiencing. Prince's warning to not trust everybody in the industry, there are a lot of sharks, wasn't metaphorical advice. It was specific intelligence about how labels destroy resistant artists. Michael Jackson had issued similar warnings, embedding them directly into his art. His 1991 Dangerous album cover literally depicted the entertainment industry facade, hiding predatory forces beneath. His movie, Moonwalker, contained explicit "keep out, no trespassing" warnings about the industry. When MJ told artists around 2000 to beware of sharks, he was describing the exact system that was already consuming D'Angelo. Virgin's strategy was psychological manipulation disguised as artist development. They would create impossible physical and creative demands, like the untitled video that D'Angelo initially called completely bonkers, then use the resulting success to trap the artist in an image they never wanted. The video's success turned D'Angelo into an X symbol, making it impossible for audiences to focus on his music. Concert-goers would scream for him to undress rather than listen to his artistry. This S image was deliberate sabotage. Virgin knew that turning D'Angelo into a X object would undermine his credibility as a serious musician and create psychological pressure that would drive him toward self-destructive behavior. The strategy worked perfectly. D'Angelo became obsessed with maintaining an impossible physical standard, restricting his diet and exercising compulsively until his health and performance abilities deteriorated.
How the music industry, they use our people, they use them up and they spit spit them out. They don't give a damn about them. They don't care if you die early from cancer. They don't give a damn about none of that.
The financial component was equally brutal. Despite selling millions of records and receiving universal critical acclaim, D'Angelo died worth only $1 million. Years of labor disputes, tax debt, and lost earnings had systematically drained his wealth. Industry insiders revealed this wasn't mismanagement, it was strategy. Labels deliberately create financial dependency by loading artists with debt, then using that desperation to maintain control. D'Angelo's 2005 arrest on DUI and substance possession charges came at his lowest point, when Virgin had cut off his funding and destroyed his reputation. The timing wasn't coincidental. Legal troubles conveniently appear when artists resist label control, creating additional pressure and public embarrassment. By the time D'Angelo realized he was trapped in a system designed to exploit him, the damage was done. His choice was simple: play the industry game and lose his artistic soul, or resist and face destruction. He chose resistance, but the cost was 14 years of exile, struggles, and financial ruin. The snakes he warned about weren't individual bad actors. They were an entire network of executives, lawyers, and industry professionals who profit from artist destruction. And in his final months, D'Angelo discovered that this system had been manipulating him in ways even more devastating than he'd imagined.
Shortly after I got signed, it just started to dawn on me that I had something to say, and that Yahweh put something in my heart to share with the world. And once you have that conviction, then the fear don't mean nothing.
The most explosive discovery came when D'Angelo learned the truth about Angie Stone's death in early 2025. What appeared to be a tragic car accident was actually the culmination of a decades-long industry conspiracy that had used D'Angelo as an unwitting weapon against the woman he loved. Angie Stone's final months were spent fighting Universal Music Group over decades of stolen royalties, publishing rights, and mechanical royalties. She discovered that UMG had been robbing her since the beginning of her solo career, using complex accounting schemes to hide millions in missing payments. When she threatened to go public with evidence of the theft, she died in a suspicious car crash just months before D'Angelo's cancer diagnosis. But the real revelation came from documents Angie had compiled before her death. She discovered that D'Angelo's erratic behavior and their relationship's destruction had been orchestrated by industry professionals who saw their partnership as a threat to their control over both artists.
Virgin Records lost patience with the slow pace and cut funding around 2004. Without label backing, his albums were shelved and tour income dropped. Contract changes and royalty delays left him struggling financially, even as his legacy stayed strong.
The Sabotage operation was sophisticated and cruel. Starting in the late 1990s, anonymous letters were sent to key industry figures, falsely accusing Angie of introducing D'Angelo to substances and alcohol. These letters painted her as a controlling, manipulative influence who was destroying his career potential. Record executives, managers, and even some musicians received these communications, poisoning the industry against Angie while positioning D'Angelo as a victim who needed saving from her influence. The letters worked perfectly. Industry professionals began advising D'Angelo to distance himself from Angie, claiming she was bad for his image and holding back his commercial potential. What D'Angelo didn't know was that these same people were simultaneously spreading rumors about his supposed substance problems and erratic behavior, creating the exact issues they claimed Angie was causing. Virgin Records was directly involved in this deception. Internal communications, revealed after Angie's death, showed executives discussing how to separate the assets and ensure that D'Angelo's commercial potential wasn't contaminated by his relationship with a less marketable partner. They viewed Angie as a threat because she was older, more experienced, and less likely to accept industry manipulation.
You can never trust them. Angie Stone and D'Angelo, they refused to sell a soul to this music industry. They refused to be quiet. They went on interviews talking the way they talk. They went on interviews really speaking their mind.
The psychological manipulation was devastating. D'Angelo began believing that his relationship with Angie was the source of his career problems, not understanding that those problems were being artificially created by the same people offering to help him. The guilt and confusion from this manipulation contributed to his issues and social withdrawal. Angie's documents revealed that she'd tried repeatedly to warn D'Angelo about what was happening, but the industry had successfully positioned her warnings as jealousy and controlling behavior. Every attempt she made to protect him was reframed as evidence of her toxic influence. The financial component was equally sinister. While destroying their personal relationship, industry professionals were also setting up separate financial arrangements that would prevent either artist from benefiting from their collaborative work. Publishing rights, mechanical royalties, and songwriting credits were manipulated to ensure maximum industry profit while minimizing artist compensation. D'Angelo discovered these documents in early 2025, just months before his cancer diagnosis. Learning that he'd been unknowingly used as a weapon against the woman he loved, and that his decades of guilt and self-blame were based on elaborate lies, triggered a psychological breakdown that may have accelerated his physical decline.
And while they was together, this music industry knew they had to break them up. They was too powerful. They don't want to wake up black love. They need to wake up black hate. They need all us to hate each other. They don't want black love. To them, they can't make money from that.
The timing of Angie's death, just as she was preparing to expose this conspiracy, raised questions that D'Angelo couldn't ignore. Her car accident occurred on a clear day, on a road she'd driven thousands of times, with no apparent mechanical failure or external cause. Industry insiders who knew about her UMG research began questioning whether her death was truly accidental. This revelation reframed D'Angelo's entire career narrative. His 14-year disappearance wasn't just about fame, pressure, or personal demons. It was a protective response to industry manipulation that he'd only partially understood. His isolation had been the only way to escape a system designed to exploit and control him. The guilt of discovering his unwitting role in Angie's career destruction, combined with the realization that their relationship had been systematically sabotaged, created emotional trauma that compounded his physical illness. D'Angelo spent his final months trying to document this conspiracy, hoping to prevent other artists from experiencing similar manipulation. What he uncovered would expose an industry network that viewed artists not as creators, but as resources to be exploited until they were used up and discarded. When Virgin finally cut off funding in late 2004, they weren't admitting failure, they were executing the final phase of their control strategy. The debt they'd artificially created became leverage for demanding ownership of existing masters, publishing rights, and creative control over future projects. D'Angelo could either accept their terms or remain financially trapped. This model had been tested on other Virgin artists with devastating success. The pattern was always the same. Identify artists with exceptional talent but limited business experience, provide seemingly unlimited resources, create artificial debt through inflated costs, then use that debt to demand creative and financial concessions that would be unacceptable under normal circumstances. Artists were made to feel guilty about costing the label money and grateful for the investment in their careers. Meanwhile, the same executives who created these costs would publicly express frustration with the artists' commercial limitations and difficult behavior, gradually shifting industry perception from talented artist to expensive problem. D'Angelo's investigation revealed that Virgin's accounting practices were potentially criminal. Costs were routinely inflated by 300 to 400% through shell companies owned by Virgin executives. Studio time that cost $500 per hour was billed at $2,000 per hour. Equipment rental fees were marked up by 500%. Personnel costs included fictional employees and inflated salaries for legitimate workers.
What our people go through dealing with these evil-ass record labels, because just like Angie Stone, D'Angelo didn't sell out. So when you don't sell out, they cut your funding. When you don't sell out, it's no more tours. When you don't sell out, they stop your music. When you don't sell out, they debt on purpose.
More disturbing was the discovery that Virgin had been systematically underreporting D'Angelo's earnings while overreporting his costs. Voodoo had generated significantly more revenue than D'Angelo was told, but complex accounting schemes had hidden these profits while maximizing the appearance of label losses. The goal wasn't just profit, it was control. The legal structure made resistance nearly impossible. Virgin's contracts included provisions that gave them broad authority over career development decisions whenever an artist's debt exceeded certain thresholds. These thresholds were easily manipulated through the artificial cost inflation, creating situations where Virgin could legally override almost any artist decision they opposed. The tax debt was particularly suspicious. IRS records allegedly showed discrepancies between Virgin's reported payments to D'Angelo and the income he actually received. The difference suggested that Virgin had been reporting full payments for tax purposes, while only providing partial payments to D'Angelo, keeping the difference while making him liable for taxes on money he never received. Industry insiders confirmed that Virgin's practices with D'Angelo were part of a larger pattern. Multiple artists from the same era had experienced similar financial manipulation, artificial debt creation, and wealth extraction. The model was so successful that it had been copied by other major labels. D'Angelo's final months were spent documenting this financial fraud and its impact on his life and career. His goal wasn't personal revenge, it was preventing other artists from falling into the same trap that had stolen decades of his creative freedom and financial security. What D'Angelo uncovered in his final investigation wasn't just Virgin Records' isolated corruption, it was evidence of an industry-wide system for identifying, exploiting, and ultimately destroying artists who pose threats to established power structures. The blueprint was consistent across labels and had been refined over decades into a precise science of psychological and financial manipulation.
It may be a bad shot, but this is real. I mean, the bones, that's real.
Yeah, my bones, yeah. I'm 5'7" and thin. I can understand what you mean.
But that's not just thin.
No, what is it? Diane, tell me.
Let's not forget Whitney Houston's case that provided the historical template. Her father's financial exploitation, combined with industry pressure to maintain an impossible image, created the exact same pattern of self-destructive behavior that appeared in D'Angelo's life. The difference was that Whitney's exploitation was family-based, while D'Angelo's was corporate-engineered. It involved financial entrapment and legal manipulation. Once psychological pressure created instability, labels would use that instability to justify increasingly invasive control measures. D'Angelo's dependence issues, partly caused by industry pressure, became justification for Virgin to demand creative oversight, financial control, and commercial concessions. The legal framework was sophisticated. Contracts included provisions that activated when artists showed signs of erratic behavior or commercial underperformance. These provisions gave labels broad authority over career decisions, but the behaviors that triggered them were often responses to label-created problems. It was a perfect circular trap.
These guys work really hard at their craft, but the story ends the same. They usually are broken, torn, and usually just sad, and the story is very sad in the end, because the companies take advantage of them.
Michael Jackson's explicit warnings about these practices had been dismissed as paranoia, but D'Angelo's documentation proved their accuracy. MJ's Dangerous album cover literally depicted the entertainment industry as a facade hiding predatory forces. His repeated warnings about sharks weren't metaphorical. They were specific intelligence about artist exploitation. Prince's battle with Warner Brothers provided the most detailed case study. His decision to change his name to a symbol and declare himself a servant was an artistic expression. It was a legal strategy designed to break contracts that had become instruments of control rather than creative partnership. Prince understood that major labels viewed artists as assets to be exploited rather than partners to be supported. Once artists recognized the system and attempted to resist, labels would destroy their industry relationships, create financial crises, and manipulate public perception to justify abandonment. The most disturbing discovery was that this system was designed to be self-sustaining. Destroyed artists became cautionary tales that frightened younger musicians into compliance. D'Angelo's struggles were used to warn other artists about the dangers of perfectionism and artistic integrity, implying that commercial compromise was the only path to stability. D'Angelo had identified specific executives, lawyers, and business managers who specialized in artist exploitation. More importantly, he'd uncovered evidence of coordination between supposedly competing labels to ensure that resistant artists couldn't simply change companies to escape manipulation. The cancer diagnosis had given him nothing left to lose, and he spent his remaining energy exposing practices that had destroyed not just his career, but an entire generation of artists who trusted the industry to support their creative vision rather than exploit their vulnerabilities.
We can't let them get away with what they're trying to do, because Now I'm a free agent.
D'Angelo's final message wasn't delivered in interviews or public statements. It was encoded in legal documents, financial records, and testimonials he'd compiled for release after his death. The message was simple but devastating. The music industry operates as an exploitation network that identifies talented artists, creates financial dependency, manipulates their psychology, and ultimately destroys them when they resist control. But the most explosive revelation was yet to come. D'Angelo had discovered that the same executives who destroyed his relationship with Angie Stone were currently targeting younger artists using identical tactics. The manipulation, financial entrapment, and psychological manipulation he'd experienced weren't historical practices. They were ongoing operations. His documentation included names, dates, financial records, and recorded conversations that could expose decades of criminal behavior. More importantly, it provided a roadmap for artists to recognize and resist these practices before falling victim to them.
People, we don't need Hollywood. We don't need the music industry. We don't need these record labels. They need us. Just look at all our legends, bro.
The timing of his death, just as he was preparing to release this information, raised questions that industry insiders couldn't ignore. Cancer is unpredictable, but the constellation of artist deaths following industry conflicts created a pattern that demanded investigation. The industry is a network designed to exploit artistic talent for maximum profit while minimizing artist benefit. His documentation could expose this network and potentially destroy careers built on artist exploitation. But the question remains, will D'Angelo's final message reach the public, or will the same forces that destroyed his career find ways to suppress evidence of their crimes? His death silenced one voice, but the documentation he left behind could amplify that voice far beyond what any living testimony could achieve. The battle for D'Angelo's legacy and the evidence he died trying to expose is just beginning.